on and crank up the podcast, I was thinking about the culture of the Northwestern Bulls, right? And don't feel no kind of way because my humble beginning started off at Edison. I went to Central and I went to Northwestern. I finished at Northwestern. But then I noticed like Northwestern have a culture. They have a feeling about what they do. They have a pride about what they do. And they do things big, right? But then I wanted to take it back, because it started before Northwestern. Our like a lot of a lot of our great grandparents, our parents, our grandparents, and some of our parents, their beginning started off over town. And I think about the bond that over town folk have. When they let me tell you something. When they say town for life, do not take that lightly. I mean, I'm like, you have to kind of been associated over there or from over there, but just know that town for life, but do not take that for no type of, that is no joke. Town for life could cut through relationships. That's how deep that is. And so I thought about that and I say, why is it like that? Did the town for life thing, did it just grow in my generation where we know about people like McCoy and Michael Robinson and Famous and Flower Man, rest in peace, and Bunky Brown, rest in peace, and the big homie Bear, I named Ra and like Bunky and all of them, all the whole Overtown, the different swamps and the different type of areas where they live at over there. And once again, just to reiterate, like the town for life thing is more serious than anything that you could probably think of. And so I asked myself, is it just because that era of time when we knew about wars and drugs and this and that, is that the part that made town for life to make that bond so thick? And so I had to go back, and I'm not from town. So I will hope somebody come on, and if you don't talk about town, talk about the culture from the canyon, from the flat tops, because back in the day we had a culture. Back in the day, even dudes that were getting money, they didn't condone children skipping school. They didn't introduce children to the dope game. They gave them their little money and they made sure they got on their way. So I'm talking about the culture. So our over town, most of us are towners for life. Because our grandparents, when they came from Carolina and they came from Georgia and they came from Palaca and they came from those places, they migrated over town and Bona Vista, which is known to us as Lincolnfield. So those are the places that our people went. Our most famous entertainers in the world. Bro, they after they went on the beach and did their thing, man, they had to come back over town. They couldn't stay on the beach. They couldn't rent hotels on the beach. They stayed in the hotels over town. So some of the greatest people and musicians and history and things, they are it grew from over town. And so I asked myself, why don't I know that history? And why don't people talk about the history? Because we said that, our brother Kev, he got his podcast. He said, man, we want to go back. We want to start talking about the old culture. And so the old culture didn't start with what I did on the streets, or what Manny Boo did on the streets, or what Bo Diddley did on the streets, or what Bert did on the streets, or what Ike did on the streets. There were history about our culture that preceded that started way before that. And so I asked myself, because our grandparents know the history. They knew the history. They knew the culture. They knew and they lived a life when Overtown was greater than Los Angeles. Our grandparents, they knew that. And some of our parents, they knew that. And so I asked myself, why didn't they tell us, or why didn't we ask about the history? And if some of you are my age, man, we kind of wasn't allowed to ask questions. Because in asking questions, man, that might have meant, that might have meant that we was out of line. So we didn't ask the questions, and our grandparents didn't sit down and tell us the history. And so what's so important about knowing history? What's so important about what our African ancestors called the oral tradition? Oral tradition in the African culture means that the elders, they sat down and they told the children hundreds of years of history so that it could be recorded and repeated after they left. It's called oral tradition. And so I'm thinking about that in the Overtown, Overtown, that's not 100 years old. Yet and still, we don't know about that. And so we say we want to teach our children, we want to teach our young children about the culture, but we don't know the history. And so we have to start talking about it. And we can start from where we were and go back, because it's what we know the most.